That's a good way to start an icebreaker for an introvert. So to practice something that I think introverts tend to be very good at is listening and hearing other perspectives before spouting. And so in prep to film this video, I actually called 3 of my absolute favorite facilitators, Mark, Amy, and Nate, and asked for their perspective on a really great exercise. And of course, they came back with some tips as well. So often we live in this culture where we don't allow for pause. Silence is something that creates discomfort for some people, and so we fill it. And so even as I'm recording this video, I want to model what I'm hoping to share, which is the ethos around any icebreaker connection exercise for introverts is just slow it down, give us some space to think and feel. And then before I share a whole slew of really fantastic icebreakers for introverts, I want to model the second tip or idea that's going to make sure all of them really land for folks. And that is, if you're going to do an icebreaker, which if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that I would happily eradicate that word from the planet and replace it with connection before content. Because for me, the biggest distinguishing factor is the connection before content is connected to the purpose of why you are there. And that is the second tip. Before you lead anything, any of the stuff I'm about to share with you, be really clear about your intent and make sure that that intention actually encompasses what other people care about, not just what you care about, right? So you might want everybody to connect. It's like, well, an introvert might want to actually just make one good connection and have a deep conversation, right? I realize that as I'm using these phrases, introvert, extrovert, that I'm generalizing and that everybody's different. So I just want to read you Nate's insight first because I think it's relevant. A few thoughts. Icebreakers / connection activities should consider all personalities, people types, because we often work with a range of people in groups. Which is like, okay, thank you, Nate. I asked you for icebreakers for introverts, and you reminded me that it's not just introverts, extroverts. We don't live in this black and white polarized land. Groups are filled with nuance, right? And of course, there are some groups that lean a little bit more introverted, engineers, while others more extroverted, sales. Regardless, group makeup, dynamic, energy should all be considered. That said, specific to introverts, I think the simple answer is any icebreaker that occurs in a pair or a small 3 to 4 person group with clear questions and guidelines for connection, as well as a time frame to return so each person knows how long they will be engaging or exerting energy. And when they return, it would be helpful for people to know ahead of time if they are sharing anything publicly to the group or not. This helps people prepare or be at ease if not sharing. And then the favorite that he shared, and he shared a whole bunch more. This text is like, look at this. Yeah. Nate's the best. His name's Nate Folan. He's a facilitator out of New Hampshire. The one that I'm picking up off that he shared that I forget to do a lot too is a simple walk and talk. I think sometimes the more like experience-based, intense, high stimulation exercise, not super introvert friendly. Whereas walking and talking, like you're not paying attention to your own nonverbals as much, like you're just walking, so you can be focused a little bit more on the content as opposed to like who you and how you're being socially, which for some people can be preoccupying. And so you there are plenty of times where I've been a bad listener because I'm paying attention to what my hands are doing or where I'm making eye contact as opposed to just like going on a walk. And so having people set a timer for 3 minutes and say walk in pairs in any direction you want to. And when the timer goes off, switch roles and start walking back and have the other person answering the question. Another brilliant tip from Nate, which admittedly, as a professional speaker and facilitator, I have practiced way too little. I think I've maybe done this a handful of times, but giving people the prompt ahead of time so that the people that want to can really ponder and think about their response before they actually get to the conversation or the meeting. Okay, then I'm switching over from text to iMessage, messaging lovely Mark Collard, founder of Playmio in Australia. I asked him what one of his favorite exercises, and this is from a guy who created a database with 500 plus different collaborative learning group exercises. And he goes, okay, this would have to be a fave for introverts. ID numbers is what it's called. Oh, no, or story of your name. No, or ESP. These are 3 different exercises. If you need a recommendation, okay, I'm going with story of your name. Actually, no, but I really like another exercise called 1, 2, 3. Point is, there are lots of options. So you should check out Playmio. Unlimited access to Playmio does come in our connection toolkit, along with this really cool brand new fold-out map thing. So feel free to check out all of those there. Right now, I'm just gonna share a story of your name. Unsurprisingly, in this exercise, you invite people to share the story of their name. Now, the point of this is not to just talk about somebody's name forever, it's to create multiple threads for curiosity and future connection. So for example, Chad Michael Littlefield. My mother did a report on the country of Chad in Africa in 5th grade or something and decided I'm going to name my firstborn son after this country. There you go. Michael, shared middle name. Littlefield sounds a bit indigenous, Native American. Littlefield, small yard. And so for our entire life, for our entire family, we're like convinced, my grandmother was convinced that we had Native heritage. And then, 23andMe came out and we were like, yeah, no. Just in sharing that little snippet of my name, I opened up multiple threads that you could be curious about or continue. I would actually, for any Icebreaker for Introverts, I would never go around in a circle and have people share, because while one person's sharing, guess what the next person's thinking about? Me, right? They're thinking about themselves, their own, totally self-absorbed in that moment. The thing is with this exercise, like when I first did it, I first read about it, I was like, okay, you share your story of your name, and then what, right? This seems like it falls into the trap that a lot of icebreakers do, which is like sharing just for the sake of, which gives introverts hives. What I like about this is it creates an anchor point or a touch point that person can connect on in the future as well. It also helps people remember names. And so if you learn the story of somebody's name on a Tuesday, 6 weeks later, you'll have had a conversation about their name. So you'll be using their name in conversation. And so it kind of brings that connection back to front and center. Lastly, I asked Amy Clymer, who's a brilliant speaker and experiential facilitator based in my old hometown of Asheville, North Carolina. A lot of her work is focused on deliberate creativity. And so I asked her for an exercise that would stretch introverts, but also promote creative thinking and kind of open people's brains up a little bit. And you know who would be a lot better at describing what Amy said than me? Amy.
All right, so here's an activity I like to do when I'm teaching people about deliberate creativity. First, a piece of being creative is our ability to be open to new ideas, to be open-minded, and to see what might come. And a tool or kind of a mindset that works really well for that is the concept from improv, like theater improv, called yes and. And so the idea behind yes and is that somebody says something and I'm just going to go with it. Like, especially if we're in that ideating stage. Like, so we're not in a decision-making mode. We're just in this listening mode. And so using that yes and approach in a meeting can be really valuable so that you're not like constantly shooting down people's ideas. Now, there is a time and a place for evaluating, but that's separate. So activity that I like to do to teach this concept of yes and is basically invite groups to make stories together. And so an icebreaker would be they get into groups of maybe 4, 5, 6 and get in a little circle. It could be at a table, it could be standing up. And one person starts a story, and the story could be about anything. If I have a deck of climber cards there, I'll often have them draw 3 climber cards just to have some images to start the story off. But you can do this without any props. And so then the first person starts and shares like 2 or 3 sentences, gets the story rolling, and then passes it to the next person. And then the next person actually says, yes, and then they add to the story. And, with a few more sentences, and then it goes to the next person. And you can have it go around the circle, like either 1 lap or 2 laps, depending on how much time you want. And then once the story is over, I tell everyone, give each other a high five and a big yell, and which is kind of fun to watch the room, fill up with all these groups yelling and giving high fives. And then I also talk about the key to making this work well is to not pre-script your story. So the story is going to come when it comes to me. I'm just open to whatever was said before and I'm adding to it. But if the story gets started and I'm person number 4 and I'm already thinking of a plot and something I want to add to the plot, inevitably the person before me is going to do something where my addition doesn't make sense. So I need to just be in the moment and be in listening mode. And then when it comes to me, add to it. And you don't have to be like overly funny or witty. You're just trying to create a story together. And it's a really cool way just to get into that way of thinking around yes and to be more creative together. I hope this helps. Have fun.
Before I share the last and possibly one of my favorite tools with you, let me also just plant a seed in your brain. This is not something I've done a lot of, but I think it's an experiment worth sharing in a video all about icebreakers for introverts. And that is journaling is this fairly loved activity by many introverts. It's a very private activity, right? It's like you even make journals with locks on them. You might have had one when you were a kid. And I wonder how we underutilize the written word when connecting with people in person. So in person, you get together for a conference or meeting or summit, it's like really verbally based. And that requires a lot of quick, fast thinking, which doesn't lend itself to really like thoughtful, deep, intentional connection, especially for somebody who is a processor and needs a minute. And so my pitch to you and my challenge to myself is, what if you invited people into more in-person collaborative journaling, where you gave people a prompt that was related to the purpose of your meeting, and you just let people journal for 5 minutes on a note card or some passable piece of paper in semi-decent handwriting. And then you invited people to get into small groups or go and swap and actually share. And it could actually even be a silent swap. It could just be go around, stand with somebody, swap cards, read each other's responses, look at the person, acknowledge them, swap the cards back, and move on. Lastly, 10 years ago, I was leading kids through these adventure programs, mountain biking, rock climbing, caving, etc. And the first half day of this week-long program was deemed as team building, which even for me, I tend to be extroverted, but even for me, team building was like, ugh, what does this look like? Particularly with a group of middle school or high school students who like want to go in a cave. The idea of sitting around talking and connecting, not really ideal. And so I asked myself, what could I put in between two of those kids and make that interaction go so much better? And out of that, I created the first deck of these question cards. And they're really simple. There's just questions on one side and actions on the other. And the inspiration to put the action on the back was looking at kids who just did not know what to do with their hands and how awkward and painful that was. I created one deck, no entrepreneurial aspirations whatsoever. I just created it for me in that particular moment. And somebody asked, hey, that's really cool. Can I have one? And I said, no, this is the only deck. Since then, We Connect cards have been born, and 100,000 plus of these decks have floated their way all around the world into 80 plus countries and schools and organizations all over. And I spent a lot of time refining the questions that are in this deck to be introvert friendly. In fact, in the little opening booklet, by the way, there's a free printable version that you can access below. So like, I'm not even trying to really like get a buck. You can just go get a free deck if you want. In the little opening booklet thing of the cards, there is a color code. Purple cards were specifically designed to give introverts in the room a hug, because purple cards are designed to encourage some level of self-reflection. And so as I'm leading exercises with the deck, I'll often invite people and say, you know, if you're asked a question, and just set the culture, if you're asked a question that you don't have an immediate response to, feel free to just take as much silence as you want to. In this context, for the next 10 minutes, it is normal to not respond right away. It's normal to just take as much time as you need to think. So this video is my challenge to you and my invite to myself to leverage the written word more when connecting in person and virtually, but it's much easier virtually. If you're interested in that, I wrote a book called How to Make Virtual Engagement Easy. Okay, this video has gone on long enough. I'm Chad Littlefield. Have an awesome day.